The Brooklyn Nets were expected to be the title favorites coming into the 2021-22 season, above teams like the Warriors, Celtics, and Heat. And the Celtics ended up sweeping these boys in the first round. Their trio of KD, Kyrie, and James Harden slowly fell apart, with the Nets trading Harden to the Sixers for Mr. Back Injury Simmons. And this is how the Nets season fell apart and what went wrong. If we rewind a couple of years back to the 2019 offseason, the Brooklyn Nets were a young and promising team led by all-star D'Angelo Russell. They just got eliminated in the first round, and it turns out this year's free agency class was the best in NBA history. And Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were both interested in Brooklyn and signed their each on max contracts. They had a top 3 duo in the league and the most incredible depth you can have. I mean, they had Spencer Dinwiddie, Jarrett Allen, and Caris LeVert as role players. Allen's an all-star now, Caris is a 20-point per game scorer, and Dinwiddie was a huge part of the Mavericks' deep playoff run this season. Things were looking bright, but they did have to wait a season because of injuries from KD and Kyrie. By the time the 2021 season rolled around, the Nets were a serious contender in the East. Then this happened.
Surprised that y'all never made a run at all in this one?
We're just not good enough. Obviously, chemistry, talent-wise, just everything, and it was clear. Like I said, these last few games, literally, I've done everything that I can. This situation is crazy. It's something that I don't think can be fixed. So,
well, this is what James Harden is doing. He's trying to force his way out of Houston. He does not want to be there.
4-team deal. Players winding up all over the place. James Harden in Brooklyn. Rockets getting Victor Oladipo and Dante Exum. Rodions Karooks, a bunch of picks. The Cavs getting Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince from Brooklyn. Caris LeVert, the former Net, now goes to Indiana.
Yeah, James Harden became a Brooklyn Net. This formed arguably the greatest offensive trio ever formed in NBA history. Harden just came off leading the league in scoring, and once he got to Brooklyn, he actually changed his game to become a playmaker over a scorer. KD came back from his Achilles injury and immediately went back to work, averaging 26.9 points per game, 7.1 rebounds, 5.6 assists, and 1.3 blocks a game with 54, 45, 88 splits. And Kyrie wasn't doing so bad either, matching Durant's average of 26.9 points per game and recorded a 50-40-90 season. The Nets finished as a second seed just behind the 76ers and matched up against the Boston Celtics in the first round. They won in a nice gentleman's sweep, and then everyone had all eyes on the series between them and the Milwaukee Bucks. The series went back and forth, with each team blowing punch after punch, but Brooklyn got extremely unlucky, having James Harden out for 5 games because of a hamstring injury and having Kyrie out for 3 games. So KD basically put this team on his shoulders and had his greatest playoff series of all time, averaging 35.4 points per game, 10.6 rebounds, and 5.4 assists on 50, 35, 83 splits. He would have actually won the series if his feet were an inch further from the line, but since it wasn't, the Bucks barely scraped out to eliminate the Nets.
That'll do it. The Bucks beat the Nets in 7. They do it in overtime. They're headed to the Eastern Conference Final, where they'll take on the winner between the Sixers and the Hawks.
This leads to the 2022 regular season, where Vegas had the Nets with the highest odds to win the championship at plus 230. The Big Three were looking to finally have a healthy season and compete, with the league looking pretty open for anyone to grab the title. The Nets also signed multiple vets like Goran Dragic by using buyout, Patty Mills, Paul Millsap, and re-signed LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin. There was a narrative floating around about how the two super teams of the Nets and Lakers would face off in a classic finals matchup for the ages. Yeah, that didn't end well. KD did solid this season, being 3rd in the race for the scoring title with an average of 29.9 points per game. Now Kyrie, on the other hand.
This is my life. This is one body that I get here. And you telling me what to do with my body, and it has nothing to do with the organization. I'm gonna put that out there. It has nothing to do with the Nets. It has nothing to do with my teammates. This has everything to do with what's going on in our world.
The Brooklyn Nets have just announced that Kyrie Irving will not play in a game or practice with the team at all until he is eligible to be a, quote, full participant.
I knew the consequences. I wasn't prepared for them by no stretch of imagination. You know, coming into the season, I had my thought process on being able to be a full teammate and a full-time teammate and just go out and have fun and provide you know, a sense of a great brand of basketball out there. But unfortunately, it didn't happen like that. Things happen for a reason, and now we're here, and I'm just grateful for this, you know, so.
Now, Kyrie did end up coming back at the end of the season due to New York lifting the vaccine mandate, but this stance had a ripple effect. Just like if you hit that subscribe button down below, and if you don't, Kyrie will come and stab the vaccine into you. Yeah, it ain't a hard decision. But Kyrie and his situation left James Harden alone since Durant was out 27 games of the season too. He quickly became frustrated, and sooner than later he demanded a trade out of Brooklyn. At this point, the Nets trio had only played 18 games together, and it really was wasted potential. Because in January, the Nets traded James Harden and Paul Millsap to the 76ers for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. Ben Simmons hadn't played a single game because of his demand to be traded because of his horrible performance in the Sixers meltdown to the Hawks in 2021. And even after the Nets season ended, Simmons just never played due to a quote-unquote back injury. Now, Seth Curry and Andre Drummond both proved to be great additions to the squad, but that didn't exactly help with their record. The Nets were the 7th seed, way off from being projected as the 1st seed. Now, they were going up against the blazing hot Boston Celtics in the first round, and believe it or not, the majority of NBA fans had the Nets pulling through. Now, nobody said it would be decidedly, since almost every fan projected the series to be 6 or 7 games long. But it turns out that the Celtics completely clamped the Nets, holding the supposed best player on the planet to 38% from the field and 5 turnovers per game. And Kyrie didn't step up, only averaging 21 points per game while the Nets got swept by the Celtics. Now, don't get it twisted, the games were actually decently close, but it seemed like 2 of the clutchest players in the league couldn't close a game for their life. Plus, the Nets really missed James Harden in this series since they didn't have a floor general and their offense was basically letting KD and Kyrie go to work. And that's the difference compared to a team like the Warriors. Golden State has multiple weapons to attack and runs a great system that makes sure the offense isn't too heavily reliant on one player with a great coach in Steve Kerr. Meanwhile, Brooklyn fumbled the bag with a coach like Steve Nash, who showed he's not that guy, and their sets and systems are so one-dimensional that it shouldn't be a surprise at how easily Boston attacked Brooklyn and shut off their key players. To add on to that, their role players were absolute garbage. Bruce Brown was the only one who stepped up when the Stars were having trouble, and everyone else became wannabe shooters that had no playmaker to make them useful. Brooklyn needed a floor general, which they probably hoped was Ben Simmons, but he would have added a whole new problem with his free throws and shooting. The Nets never had any consistent defender as well. The only guy who was remotely close to that was probably Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown is a keeper, not gonna lie, bro. If you let him go, I don't know what to say. But it's clear the Nets never functioned as a team, but rather KD and Kyrie with a bunch of guys that could complement them. And once those 2 were shut, the whole team fell with them. Honestly, what could the Nets do to get better? First of all, get rid of their useless coach in Steve Nash, who clearly rides his stars' demands and depends on them performing. And once they don't, he goes out there and makes excuses why they couldn't come through. Second, they need a reliable set of role players that are able to create their own shot, like someone like a Spencer Dinwiddie. Because if nobody on your roster other than your stars can create their shot, your team will crumble once defenses absolutely suffocate them. Literally only one supposed contender was like that, and nobody wants to be like them.
Reeves gives it up. Westbrook in the corner area. Rush in the attacking zone, the former Rock. Pulls up, wants to use the window and hit the top of the glass.
But defensively, they really struggled.
Westbrook, his shot hits the top of the backboard.
Guys, good experience off the bench.
And the young guys certain to
Also, Ben Simmons needs to buy into the system or else the Nets will have the same problem the Sixers had with him, and that's definitely not gonna help. All Brooklyn needs is for him to be a floor general and elite defender with a little bit of slashing to add something dynamic in the offense to make it harder to stop. But KD, even though he didn't perform up to standard, was one of the best players during the 2010s. 2-time champion, 2-time finals MVP, regular season MVP, 4-time scoring champ, absolutely generational. But I mean, LeBron has gotta take it as the best of the decade. If you want to see the other ones, check out this video above, and as always, see you next time.